you and I have talked about, I still think it's crypto spring. We're not yet in summer, but you're just getting the later stages of spring where you start to have a few nice days in a row and it starts to feel good and you start to think about, having drinks outside in the pub and doing things in the sun. So that's where that point usually really doesn't get going. This is usually the prequel. It usually doesn't get going till summer of next year, which is that kind of halving year. That's when it goes like this almost every day for 18 months.
Exactly. So I wanted to show
nice once to come in and go, oh my God, is that up that much?
I joke with you, like, how much of the Bitcoin do you want? Oh, I want it all. Well, I'm not going to get it all. I mean, if I work my entire life, I might work my way up to 1% or 1.5% or something if I get very lucky and I'm very diligent and the wind blows in the right direction. But if I do, and if I end up buying $100 billion of this stuff, then there'll be something like $99.9 trillion of Bitcoin for everybody else, you see. some crazy thing, right? You're just going to drive up the value of it in an insane amount.
We're at the stage where we're just kind of breaking out, then we're likely to finish the year strong and then sideways for a while, sideways to down for a bit before it really gets going. So it's somewhere between the 2019 and the 2015-16. It seems that there was some story that BlackRock had already bought some, buffer so they can sell ETF when it comes out. But I don't think that's a lot, but there's clearly new capital come into the space. We saw it with CoinShares, a few others starting to report inflows of capital. So that's new money going into the economy, and obviously a bunch of bored degens turn it into a lot of price rises. But then we had the other story that ignited. So Bitcoin had been strong anyway because of the ETF. ETH has been it was okay, but it's been pretty sideways for a while. The thing that really started igniting was both DeFi stuff. They came out of nowhere, really rallying, and that's often early season stuff. And the other was obviously Solana. I haven't held much Bitcoin for a while because I look at this in terms of network effects, and my view is that more things are being built on Ethereum. It's a richer, deeper network, more use cases, and over time, I think the value of the Ethereum network will be more valuable than the Bitcoin network unless something changes. Now, ordinals and stuff like that, maybe, let's see. And so it's just from that thesis alone that I haven't held much Bitcoin. I've just thought it'll underperform. Now, it always outperforms in crypto spring. The least risk asset in that space always outperforms at first. Then what happens as spring turns into summer, you start getting outperformance of alts, and particularly the large alts first and then the smaller alts later. So there's nothing unusual about what's going on. Also very interesting to see the chart of Sol, ETH, Bitcoin, kind of long-term weekly chart. It's been a very interesting, that to me is an incredibly interesting chart because I actually draw the wedge coming up from 2017 low through the 2020 lows.
Hold on, I think this is your chart, right?
No, it's not that one. This is the bigger one than that. So go back to your chart. Okay, just draw a trend line from the 2017 low.
2017 low. So you want it from there?
Yeah.
Okay, let's draw that trend line over there.
This is what I'm really interested in.
Holy shit.
This is right. This is a fucking massive wedge pattern. Now, I put it on a log chart, on the log scale.
Let me quickly put it onto the log.
It is on log.
It is on log. So, I mean, this is a big level for ETH.
Yeah, and we're putting in the stuff that I look at, DeMark indicators, everything else. They're suggesting the low comes this week, next week, the week after. So I'm thinking that the narrative around ETH is going to be wrong. It's going to catch people offside. People have basically, because there's been no new money in the space, so they've sold their ETH to buy Bitcoin.
Okay.
Because of the ETF, right? And this point in the cycle. Makes sense, fine. Then what happens is the ETF is announced. What is everybody going to do after the Bitcoin ETF is announced?
Buy ETH. They're going to buy ETH because the SEC can't actually decline an ETH ETF because they've approved an ETH futures ETF. And if they did, that would be capricious. And what's the other word, the fancy word that the judge used? It would be capricious if they did that, right?
Exactly. So every trader is going to switch their bet from Bitcoin to ETH. And that changes the dynamic. Now, ETH has been kind of, as I said, struggling around a bit. But once it clears 1900, it gets really interesting. I think I put out a chart yesterday on the ETH chart on my Twitter feed.
And you said it's a gorgeous chart. Is this the one?
Yeah.
Tell me why it's such a gorgeous chart. I mean, you tweeted and you said this is a gorgeous chart.
So what we've got is, it's an Elliott wave chart, and it's a beautiful technical pattern of this lovely kind of flag. So Elliott wave, you tend to get 5 wave advances, ABC declines in a bull market. So you had this wave up 1, it retraces all the way back down, doesn't make a new low, that's a wave 2. Then you start on what is a wave 3. Wave 3s are the big dynamic waves. But within that, it breaks down to subwaves. So this was wave 1, wave 2 was the correction. And now if you break that, you go into what's known, the most exciting thing of Elliott wave is a 3 of 3. That's where you get the double acceleration point. What we've just seen in Solana feels like it's going to happen in ETH. Particularly now everybody's underweight ETH. People have seen the Solana move. Let's say the Bitcoin ETF comes. You break that trend line, which is about 1900. And before you know it, you're on your way to 2,500 and beyond. ETH should do really well. And then there'll be a lag before the real altcoin cycle starts. But that's coming soon as well. Even the wedge of altcoin market cap on TradingView is breaking out of a perfect wedge. So if you go back to 2008, everybody got the get out of jail free card of 0 interest rates. So nobody had to pay interest on their debt. That was like a gift, right? 0 interest rates. Every government refunded at 0, but for some weird reason, they did it between 3 and 5 years. That 3 and 5 year debt cycle just keeps rolling over. It's exactly the Bitcoin halving cycle. It's exactly the economic cycle. It's exactly the US election cycle. They're all the same thing. It's this super cycle, this everything code. And we're into that point of the cycle now where the balance sheet should start rising, cover the debts from the previous, right? So this is the idea that, okay, global M2 is now positive. And I've always said the moment liquidity goes above 0 in its rate of change, then it's like taking the foot off a beach ball underwater. It kind of explodes higher because these assets want to trend higher. So first up,
why is M2 growing if the US is absorbing, if the US is taking M2 out of the economy, right? Or am I reading this wrong?
yeah, because Japan, China,
Okay.
there's other people involved in the M2 calculation, right? This is global M2. So what's happened is global M2 is rising and it will continue to rise. We do have a lot of forward-looking work at GMI. That's what got us very bullish and adding to all of our crypto bets back at the end of last year. It's because liquidity had started to rise. We're like, okay, this is interesting. So if we go down to the next chart,
There it is.
this is Bitcoin outperforming the NASDAQ versus global M2, right? So at this point, I call this the supermassive black hole. You don't want to own anything except crypto at this point in the cycle because it starts outperforming everything. So that becomes all interesting. Let's go on to the next.
Okay, I'll take us to the next one. There we go.
Okay, I'm giving you my whole hot chart left.
Oh, great. I love this. This is great. And I'm sure everybody else is enjoying it.
So this is the weekly global liquidity index, which is 5 of the world's largest central banks, global net liquidity. And what we're seeing is it's not quite at 0 yet. Right, this is the big daddy of indicators. This is the thing that we get when we put just the outright weekly liquidity index. We get a 97.5% correlation with the NASDAQ and 87% with Bitcoin. So this is the big daddy. It's not quite there, but it's almost at 0. You know, and once it starts getting to 0, we kind of get into what we refer to as the banana zone, when all assets go bananas. Okay, next.
Well, I mean, it's pretty close to 0. I mean, it's like
Very close. And the next one will show you why. So yeah, this is the one including the private sector. That's now positive.
okay.
And then Fed net liquidity, that's just the US. That's positive too.
Okay.
And all of the forward-looking stuff suggests, that's the other one, is if that trend line continues to break, banks are up strongly today because the yields have gone down again. If the banks break, then we know they're just going to hit the accelerator button to all of this stimulus.
If you're living in fear and you're saving in dollars, you've got a life expectancy of 4 years or 2 years or 14 years, right? When are you going to run out? And when you flip it, your life expectancy is infinite. Or your energy expectancy is like now the energy is going to outlast my organic frame. In fact, my money will live beyond me. And now you're like, and John, maybe this is an interesting place where you get to religion and morality, because if your money's going to outlive you, you start thinking about children, right? You start thinking about, I got to be married, I should have children. I start thinking about my children. And then you start thinking, I better make sure that my kids aren't spoiled. I better make sure they're well educated. I better protect them because I don't want a spoiled kid with a lot of money, that's going to squander it. And then you start thinking, oh, that park in my neighborhood, I think I'm going to endow that and I'm going to keep that park. And then I start thinking, well, I got to fix my country because my kids are going to live in it. And so when you feel like your energy will go on, your time horizon goes beyond this horizon, and then, it's probably good that you're going to die. Because if you know you're going to die, you think, well, I better actually put my energy into institutions and my family or people around me so that they'll live on and they'll express my values and maybe they'll remember me, right? And what I did for them. If I told you I'm going to give you Bitcoin and you can live forever, you know, you might almost become too inwardly focused that only thinks of themselves and you just generally go insane. So I don't know about that one. I'm not sure. I'm not ready to grapple with that. That's a philosophical, metaphysical thing. And you know where this is expressed in the last 1,000 years? It was in the writing of a book. So if you lived 500 years, if you're Charles Dickens, or, you know, if you're any of the great writers, you know, they would sit down and they have something to say. They write a book, Voltaire, and they gave it to the world. And you get the poignant sense that, right, they were writing to future generations, and then you're leaping across the years, you know, to get their wisdom. So it used to be the way that you could immortalize yourself, your ego, your sentiment, your life experiences was to write the book, right? Even Caesar wrote the book, right? They wanted to leave that. Well, so now with Bitcoin, you can leave the book, but you can also leave more than the book. I mean, you're going to leave these podcasts. So, I mean, maybe 10,000 years from now, people are going to look at John Vallis and try to figure out what was going on into the Bitcoin era, right? And they'll be looking at you. And so say hi to people 10,000 years from now, John. You know, we miss you guys. Don't screw it up, you know? And it boils down to just this last phrase, right? Bitcoin is hope, right? Bitcoin is hope. Now you have hope. You can see beyond the horizon. And now that you have hope, you got to figure out what you're going to do with your life and what you're going to do with your life energy, because someone gave you back the option. And before Bitcoin, we took it away from you.